as we're following the breaking news and watching what's unfolding right now on Coast Guard Island and then eventually maybe spreading to other cities around the Bay, the big question is going to be, what should you do if you are protesting and you're approached by an officer, like an ICE agent, whether or not they have the authority to arrest you? What are you supposed to do?
Yeah. So for advice on that, we have immigration attorney Gabriel Espinoza joining us this morning. Once again, it's good to see you again, Gabriel. Thank you so much for joining us. And firstly, your reaction to what's happening this morning as we've been watching it play out live, and then we'll get to some advice for folks.
Most definitely. I think this is an overreach by the administration. There is a federal law in place called the Posse Comitatus Act, which was used in the lawsuit by Governor Newsom against the Trump administration in August, which essentially limits the use of federal armed agents in domestic enforcement of any type. And I just want to add that crime has been at an all-time low here in San Francisco. So I definitely see a looming lawsuit pending citing this law again. But back to your question about safety and protesting, I know that this has been a very hot topic and has been very much present in our community, especially regarding the immigration courts. What I'm seeing is some of the protesters are attempting to use themselves as human barricades, as shields, when they see their neighbors being essentially kidnapped by these agents. Unfortunately, that gives them grounds to cite that they're claiming that they're being threatened in some way because there's a type of physical action at this point. So I would urge the community members who are in protest to please abstain from any physical activity towards the officials.
Does that include blocking vehicles like we saw play out earlier this morning on Coast Guard Island?
Yeah, this morning people are out on the streets, and that counts, right? Because the Coast Guard is trying to let people by, and you know the ICE agents tried to get through. They said, "Oh, move or else we're gonna go," and nobody moved. So then they started going. They ran over a guy's foot. They put a flashbang off with some kind of a tear agent and kept going. So they're like, "Hey, we're justified in doing that. You wouldn't move."
That's exactly what I mean, in the sense that they're going to cite to that they are being threatened, even though they're in a car. Obviously, they have the force to prevent that. But it's also a safety issue for the protesters because, to your point, things like that happened. I will also cite to July at the immigration court, which was one of my last immigration court hearings in San Francisco, where I witnessed ICE brandishing weapons. The protesters, rifles. In some instances, I just want to note that these ICE officers are not very well trained on basic laws, on what their limitations are and are not. And so because of that unpredictability, it is very dangerous, in my opinion, to assert any type of physical action against them. I do want to caveat, though, that recording them is legal. But again, I always want to caution to only do so if you feel safe to do so, meaning we have seen in other cities in the US where some of the ICE agents have been threatening the protesters for merely recording, which is illegal, by the way. But if a person feels safe to record, that can be used to potentially nullify a deportation order if it was coerced, meaning they forced a person to sign a voluntary departure to expedite it, or under various circumstances. So recording is definitely viable. And if you feel safe to do so, I encourage people to do so. It is a legal right. But in terms of throwing things at the officers, lunging at, that can also potentially lead to federal charges for assaulting a federal agent, and that is something that may be able to be challenged, but those are the legal ramifications of those actions. So Chandy saying things, recording, I think that's still viable, but definitely abstain from physical activity towards the officers that could be a danger to the protesters, to others, and also have legal consequences.
This is such a tricky thing because I also hear your advice about, and all the attorneys say, okay, if you're in an immigration court, for example, show up for your hearing, have all your material, don't resist. And I'm thinking, I'm running. I'm because I understand what my rights are, but it doesn't matter if I'm already arrested and shipped off to God knows where. So, like, what do you tell people in that case? They don't want to let it play out in court later with you.
Understand, and I completely see that point, and it's a valid point. However, not going to the hearing will only cause potentially expedited removal. So this is the situation the government has put people in. However, in terms of when you mentioned detentions, right now people are able to be released. Yeah, I know the administration has made it harder because they have denied bonds, but there is a strategy in place that only a few immigration lawyers know, which is called habeas corpus, which is traditionally a defense in criminal law that can apply to basically ensure a person gets a trial, right to a fair trial before their process is concluded, meaning in this case, before they are deported permanently somewhere else. So things to note when a person is detained: if possible, what is their A number? Anyone who is in an immigration proceeding in the U.S., whether it be through an application or an immigration court, they have what is called an A number. It starts with an A and then proceeds with a few numbers. That is how to identify this person if they are put in detention, and ideally their name, but if not, at least their country of birth, because what can be done with this information is that the person can be looked up in a database with DHS, USCIS as to where they were taken, and then the defense strategy can start. Another key point to keep in mind with detentions, when looking for a lawyer to help you with get out of detention, in my opinion, habeas corpus is currently the most effective strategy. I strongly advise that anyone looking for a family member as an attorney, that the person is well versed in detention, specifically habeas corpus. I have colleagues I refer out for these cases that are very well versed in this. Make sure that lawyer is experienced with that, because we're seeing as immigration lawyers, that is the fastest way to get people out of detention in this current climate.
Have you ever, I don't know, tell me how long you've been in this career, and are you just overwhelmed with stuff? Like, what's happening as a lawyer in these shoes? Can you guys handle all the cases that are coming to you?
I started out as an interpreter in the asylum office back in 2012, and I started practicing like almost 5 years now, and I see an overwhelming influx of people afraid, right? And what should I do? What can I do if I'm detained? People think that if they are detained, that is the last stop, that there's no way out. That is not true. I just wanted to use this platform, and thank you for asking that wonderful question, that habeas corpus is working. There are some great attorneys who are successfully getting people out of detention. There are also nonprofits that do this work. The Rapid Response Line is critical for this work as well. So shout out to them.
Yeah, we've got the line up right now so that people can jot that down. Really good information,
absolutely,
too. Because it would be a scary situation. And then every time you say lawyer, I go, all right, I don't know a lawyer. I don't have the money, and so...
This hotline will go a long way to helping people get the information they need. Gabriel Espinoza, thank you so much for joining us this morning with all that valuable information.